Alright, here's me being straight with you while still talking like a close friend. Not a therapist on YouTube. Before we start, one hard truth up front. Most people massively misunderstand avoidance. They either romanticize them or demonize them. Both are lazy takes. Avoidants aren't mysterious geniuses or heartless villains. They're people running a very predictable, internal algorithm driven by fear of dependency and loss of control. Once you see the steps, the confusion disappears. Now let's get into it. Chapter 1, the exact moment your text arrives. So picture this. You send a normal text. Nothing dramatic. Maybe even sweet. Maybe just, hey, how was your day? And here's what you think happens. They read it, feel something, maybe miss you, maybe smile, maybe reply later. Yeah. No. That's not what happens first. Here's what I think actually goes on. Step 1. The notification hits and it's not neutral. You won't believe this, but the very first reaction isn't happiness or annoyance. It's alertness. Like a subtle internal, uh-oh. Not panic. Not anger. More like something just entered my mental space. Because for an avoidant, a text isn't just a text. It's a bid for access. Access to their time. Access to their emotions. Access to their autonomy. Can you imagine living like that? Where even small connection pings register as pressure. That's their baseline. Step 2. Micro scan. What does this mean? Now comes the internal scan. They look at who sent it, the wording, the timing, the emotional tone, not consciously like a checklist. It's automatic. And here's the brutal part people don't want to hear. Avoidants overinterpret texts way more than anxious people do. You wrote, miss you. They read, expectation. You wrote, just checking in. They read, monitoring. You wrote, no pressure, reply whenever. They read, there is pressure. Sounds unfair? It is. But that's the wiring. Step 3. Immediate loss of freedom calculation. So right after reading, their brain asks one core question. If I respond, what happens next? Not, do I like this person? Do I care? Do I miss them? Nope. The avoidant brain jumps straight to future obligation. If I reply fast gives, they'll expect that again. If I reply warmly gives, they'll want more closeness. If I don't reply gives, tension builds. So even before emotion shows up, strategy does. What do you think that does to genuine connection? Yeah, it strangles it. Step 4. Emotional delay, not absence. Here's something people get wrong all the time. Avoidants do feel. They just feel after control is secured. So in this moment, emotion gets postponed. It's like, hold on, let me stabilize first. Then I'll feel later. That's why you often get delayed replies, dry replies, random replies at odd hours. Not because they don't care, but because caring without control feels dangerous to them. Uncomfortable truth? They trust themselves alone more than they trust connection. Step 5. The freeze phase. Now comes the pause. Phone down. No reply yet. And this isn't always intentional. Sometimes they genuinely think they'll reply in a minute, but a minute becomes an hour. Several hours? A day. Why? Because responding means engaging. And engaging means risk. Risk of emotional pull, expectations, being needed, and need equals threat in their nervous system. Crazy, right? Needing someone is supposed to feel bonding. To an avoidant, it feels like losing oxygen. Step 6. Rationalization kicks in. Now here's where it gets sneaky. They start justifying the delay to themselves. Things like, I'm busy. I'll reply when I have energy. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to lead them on. Some of these sound reasonable, but notice something? None of them are about you. They're about self-regulation. Avoidants aren't asking, what does this person need? They're asking, how do I stay comfortable? And before you judge, this was learned early. This is survival wiring, not malice. Step 7. Emotional echo. Yes, it exists. Here's the part people don't see. After the freeze, sometimes later, emotion leaks in. They might think about you randomly, replay the text, Feel a small pull? Feel warmth mixed with irritation. It's confusing even to them. They think, why am I thinking about this now? Because emotions weren't processed when the text arrived. They were postponed. So now they show up late, like delayed notifications. But here's the kicker. Step 8, they still don't reply. Not yet. Why? Because now emotion is present, and that actually makes it harder. Emotion increases the stakes. Replying now feels like opening a door, starting something, inviting more, so they wait again. This is where people get hurt the most, because from the outside it looks like indifference. But internally, it's avoidance plus emotion fighting each other. Hard truth you need to hear. If you're texting an avoidant hoping your message will, make them miss you. Make them realize your value. Make them open up. You're aiming at the wrong mechanism. Texts don't bypass avoidant defenses. They activate them. Connection through words is harder for avoidance than connection through shared space or action. That's why. They're warmer in person, colder over text, inconsistent online. Not because they're fake. Because distance feels safer than emotional immediacy. All right. That's only the first phase, the moment. Your text arrives and what happens? Internally before any reply exists? Let's keep going, and I'm not going to baby this. If Chapter 1 was about what happens when your text lands, Chapter 2 is about the moment that really messes people up, when the avoidant actually considers replying. This is where most people project romance, logic, or maturity onto someone who is operating from a threat management system, not a connection system. So, yeah, here's what I think is really happening. Chapter 2, when they think about replying and why it's so weird. Step 1, the phone comes back out. So some time passes. Could be 10 minutes, 3 hours. The next day, they pick up the phone again. And here's the first uncomfortable truth. They already know they should reply. This isn't ignorance. This isn't them forgetting. It's delay with awareness. They see your name again and think, okay, I need to deal with this. Notice the word deal. Not enjoy. Not connect. Deal. What do you think that says about how their nervous system experiences closeness? Step 2, they open the message. Again, you won't believe this, but they often reread your text multiple times. Not because it's romantic, because they're scanning for hidden demands. They're asking, is there an expectation here? Do they want reassurance? Will replying create momentum? Is this going to turn into a conversation? And if the answer feels like maybe, tension increases. This is where avoidance and anxious people completely invert each other. Anxious people read texts for emotional tone. Avoidance read texts for future consequences. Step 3, the internal debate starts. Now the mental tug-of-war begins. One side says, just reply. It's not a big deal. The other side says, but if I reply, I'll get pulled in. And here's the thing no one tells you. Both sides are loud. Avoidants are not calm inside. They're conflicted. They want connection in theory. They fear it in practice. So now they're stuck. Step 4, drafting the reply and deleting it. This part drives people insane because you never see it. They start typing, then stop, then delete, then type again. Why? Because they're trying to achieve a very specific balance. Not cold, not warm, not inviting, not rejecting. Basically, how do I respond without opening a door? That's the real goal. Not honesty, not closeness, damage control. Can you imagine trying to communicate while constantly avoiding impact? Step 5. Why the reply feels flat. So eventually if they do reply, it often sounds like, yeah, it was fine. Just busy. Yeah. And you think, why is this so dry? Here's why. Emotionally expressive replies feel binding to avoidance. Warmth equals signal. Signal equals expectation. Expectation equals loss of autonomy. So they flatten the message. Not because they don't feel anything, but because they don't want to signal availability. This is also why avoidants hate long text conversations. Texts don't end cleanly. There's always the possibility of one more message, and that feels like being slowly cornered. Step 6. The fear of momentum. Here's a critical point most people miss. Avoidants don't fear one message. They fear what comes after. If they reply now, will you reply back immediately? Will the conversation continue? Will emotional depth increase? Will they be expected to maintain this energy? So sometimes they intentionally reply late or briefly to kill momentum. That's not an accident. That's regulation. They're slowing the pace to stay comfortable. And yes, it often hurts the other person. Step 7. Guilt shows up, but quietly. Contrary to popular belief, many avoidants do feel guilt. But it's not dramatic guilt. It's more like, I know I'm not showing up the way I should, then immediately followed by, but I can't handle more than this. So instead of resolving the guilt through action, they resolve it through distance. Because distance reduces pressure. This is why apologizing often feels empty with avoidance. They'll say, sorry, but behavior won't change. Because the problem isn't intention, it's capacity. Step 8. Silence as self-protection. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Sometimes they don't reply at all. Not because they forgot, they hate you, they're evil, but because silence feels like safety. Silence means no expectations, no emotional labor, no risk of being pulled. And once silence happens, another layer appears. Step 9. The now it's awkward loop. After enough time passes, they think, now it's too late, so replying feels awkward. And awkwardness equals emotional exposure. So they avoid again. This is how texts die without closure. Not with drama, not with a fight. Just, and the other person is left filling in the blanks. Here's the brutal truth. Don't skip this. If you're analyzing an avoidance text timing to determine how much they care, how important you are, whether they're emotionally available, you're using the wrong metric. Avoidance can care deeply and still avoid responding. That doesn't make it okay, but it makes it predictable. The real indicator isn't what they text. It's, do they initiate at all? Do they create shared experiences? Do they show up when it actually matters? Texting is a weak signal for avoidance. Why chasing through text backfires? Here's where I'm going to challenge you. If you respond to avoidant distance by double texting, explaining yourself, reassuring them, asking for clarity, you're increasing the very pressure they're trying to escape. Your logic might be, if I explain better, they'll understand. Their nervous system hears, more emotional demand. And guess what happens next? More withdrawal. Not because you're wrong, but because avoidance isn't logical. It's physiological. So yeah, that's chapter 2. The moment they consider replying and why it so often feels unsatisfying, confusing, or hollow on your end. Let's keep this moving, and I'm not going to soften it. If chapter 2 was about deciding to reply, chapter 3 is about the phase that confuses people the most and wrecks their confidence. What happens after the avoidant replies? This is where you think things are improving, and they start pulling away. So yeah, here's what I think is really going on. Chapter 3. After they reply, why things suddenly shift. Step 1. Immediate self-monitoring. So they send the reply, even a small one, and almost instantly something flips inside them. Not relief, not satisfaction, monitoring. They think, okay, what did I just set in motion? This is crucial. For avoidance, sending a message isn't the end of a task. It's the start of consequences. They're now hyper-aware. Did I sound too warm? Did I invite a follow-up? Did I create expectations? You're thinking, nice, they replied. They're thinking, did I just open a door I can't close? Step 2. Waiting for your response feels stressful. Here's something most people completely misread. When you wait for a reply, it's anxious. When they wait for your reply, it's threatening. Because your response determines whether the conversation continues, whether emotional intensity increases, whether they'll need to stay engaged. So even if they like you, part of them hopes you don't respond quickly. Yeah, read that again. Your fast reply feels like pressure, not validation. Step 3. The push-pull kicks in. If you respond warmly, enthusiastically, or emotionally, that's when the internal alarms go off. They think, okay, this is getting close. And closeness triggers distancing, not because closeness is bad, but because closeness feels uncontrollable. So what do? They take longer to reply again, shorten their responses, change topics, suddenly get busy. From your side, it looks like mixed signals. From their side, it's regulation. Step 4. Why good moments often lead to coldness. This part really messes people up. You have a good exchange, maybe even laughing, flirting, emotional openness, and then silence. You start thinking, did I say something wrong? Here's the truth. Positive emotional connection is more threatening to avoidance than neutral interaction. Because good moments create attachment, memory, desire, and desire risks dependence. So after a good interaction, they often need distance to calm their nervous system. It's not rejection. It's decompression. Step 5. Post-interaction rationalization. Now they start talking to themselves. Things like, this is getting too much. I need space. I don't want to lead them on. I should pull back before it goes further. Notice how noble some of these sound. But underneath, it's still about control. They're not thinking, what does this connection need? They're thinking, how do I reduce intensity? So they step back. Step 6. Why they rarely follow up. You might expect a check-in, a continuation, hey, about earlier. But that usually doesn't happen. Why? Because following up feels like ownership of the connection. And ownership feels like obligation. So instead of leaning in, they wait for time to pass, emotional intensity to drop, you to stop reaching out. Silence becomes the reset button. Step 7. The emotional amnesia effect. Here's something wild. After creating distance, avoidants often experience emotional dampening. They think, it wasn't that deep. I'm fine. I don't really need this. That's not gaslighting you. That's deactivation. Their system literally turns down emotional volume to restore equilibrium, which is why they can seem detached, unbothered, inconsistent, even after meaningful moments. Step 8. Why they might reappear later. Now this is where people get hopeful and get hurt. After space, once things feel safe again, they may pop back up. A casual text, a meme, a random check-in. And you think, see, they do care, and you're not wrong. But here's the pattern. Connection rises, threat triggers, distance restores safety, loneliness creeps in, they re-engage lightly. That's the loop. Without self-awareness and work, it doesn't resolve. It just repeats. Step 9. The uncomfortable reality you need to accept. Here's where I'm going to push you. If you stay in this cycle thinking, if I'm patient enough, consistent enough, understanding enough, you're gambling your emotional stability. Avoidants don't change because someone loves them harder. They change when the cost of avoidance outweighs the comfort, or they consciously work on their attachment patterns. Anything else is fantasy. Why you feel exhausted? Let me guess. You feel confused, drained, like you're always adjusting, like you're waiting for the real version of them. That's because you're responding to inconsistency. And humans are not wired to feel safe in inconsistent emotional environments. Your nervous system is getting whiplash. That's not love. That's dysregulation. Straight talk, don't ignore this. Understanding avoidance does not mean tolerating neglect. Empathy without boundaries turns into self-abandonment. Yes, they're struggling. No, it's not your job to absorb the damage. All right. That's Chapter 3, the after effect phase where replies lead to distancing, and closeness creates coldness. All right, final stretch. And I'm going to be extra blunt here, because this is where people usually lie to themselves. If Chapters 1 to 3 explained what's happening in the avoidance head, Chapter 4 is about what you should actually do with that information. Not how to fix them. Not how to wait better. Not how to word the perfect text. but how to stop bleeding energy into a dynamic that may never stabilize. So yeah, here's what I think. No sugarcoating. Chapter 4. What actually works, what never will, and when to walk away. Step 1. Stop believing texting is the battlefield. Let's kill this illusion first. If you think one perfect message will unlock them, the right timing will make them open up, enough patience will make them consistent, you're lying to yourself. Avoidants are not unlocked through communication tactics. They're regulated through felt safety plus autonomy, and even that has limits. Texting is a trigger environment for avoidance. It's abstract. It's open-ended. It creates invisible expectations. So trying harder through text usually makes things worse. Hard fact. If texting is the main place where you're trying to build closeness with an avoidant, you're already losing. Step 2. What actually works and why people hate this answer. Here's what sometimes works, not always, sometimes. 1. Low frequency, low pressure contact. Not disappearing. Not disappearing? Not chasing. Short, neutral, grounded. Think. One message, not a conversation. No emotional hooks. No follow-up questions stacked together. Why this works. It doesn't spike their nervous system. But listen carefully. This doesn't create intimacy. It just avoids triggering withdrawal. That's a big difference. 2. Letting them initiate without punishment. If every time they resurface you, bring up the distance, ask for explanations, demand clarity, they'll associate re-engaging with emotional labor. So they'll stop re-engaging. But here's the part people ignore. Letting them initiate only matters if they actually do it consistently. If weeks pass and nothing happens, that's information, not a challenge. 3. Real-world connection over digital bonding. Avoidants regulate better with shared activities, physical presence, practical interaction. They struggle with emotional texting, long talks about feelings, relationship processing through words. If they're warm in person and cold online, that's not random. But, and this is important, if they're cold everywhere, that's not attachment style. That's disinterest. Step 3. What never works? Stop doing these. Now, I'm going to call out the stuff people keep doing even after it hurts them. 1. Explaining your needs repeatedly. You think you're being mature. They hear more responsibility. Avoidants don't respond to repeated explanations. They respond to consequences. Not threats. Not ultimatums. Natural consequences. 2. Emotional essays. Long messages equals emotional weight. Even if they read it, even if they understand it. Understanding does not equal capacity. You can explain something perfectly and still overwhelm them. 3. Waiting quietly while hoping they change. This is the most dangerous one. You tell yourself, I'm giving them space. But what you're actually doing is pausing your needs, freezing your life, staying emotionally available without reciprocity. That's not patience. That's self-abandonment. Step 4. The question you must answer. No avoiding this. Here's the question most people refuse to ask themselves. If this never changes, can I live like this? Not. What if they heal? What if they realize my worth? What if I'm almost there? No. If this pattern stays exactly the same, the delays, the inconsistency, the emotional distance, the push-pull, can you genuinely be okay? If the answer is no, then staying is a choice to suffer. And you don't get bonus points for enduring emotional scarcity. Step 5. How to tell avoidance from disinterest. This matters a lot. Avoidance still includes some initiation, effort in practical ways, showing up when it counts, repair attempts, even clumsy ones. Disinterest looks like you always reach out. They respond but never build. Time passes with no repair. You feel like an option, not a priority. Attachment style explains how someone connects. It does not excuse absence. If someone consistently chooses distance over connection, believe the behavior. Step 6. The exit isn't dramatic, it's quiet. Here's something no one tells you. The healthiest way to step away from an avoidant dynamic isn't confrontation. It's reallocation of energy. You stop initiating as much. Stop overthinking replies. Stop waiting for emotional crumbs. Start filling your life elsewhere. And one of two things happens. They feel the loss and step up. They drift away completely. Both outcomes give you clarity. Chasing never does. Step 7. The final truth. Read this slowly. Avoidants are not broken, but they are limited unless they choose to work on it. Love does not heal avoidance. Understanding does not cure distance. Patience does not create capacity. You cannot regulate someone else's nervous system for them. And if you keep shrinking your needs to stay connected, you're not being loving, you're being afraid. So let me ask you something, and be honest. Are you trying to understand avoidance? Or are you trying to convince yourself to accept less than you need? Because those are two very different motives, and only one of them leads somewhere healthy. That's it. That's chapter 4. No mystery left. No fantasy left.